Former President Trump is scheduled to appear at the Miami federal courthouse today at 3 p.m. Eastern, where he is set to be arraigned on 37 charges related to his handling of classified documents. The former president, writing on Truth Social, quote, "Now that the seal is broken, I will appoint a real special prosecutor to go after the most corrupt president in the history of the United States, Joe Biden, the entire Biden crime family." White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre claims that President Biden is restoring the Department of Justice's integrity. Watch this.
This is a president that respects the rule of law. This is a president that wants to make sure and has proven that to be in his actions to make sure that the Department of Justice is truly independent. He's restoring certainly the integrity of the Department of Justice, and that is something that's important to this president.
Joining me right now is Florida Congressman, member of the House Armed Services and Foreign Affairs Committees, Cory Mills is here. Congressman, good to see you. Thanks very much for being here. Assess where we are. President Trump going to be in the federal courthouse today, while Karine Jean-Pierre says Joe Biden is defending and restoring the DOJ integrity.
Well, Maria, I mean, let's start out with the very beginning. We know that when most presidents actually leave the White House, that they maintain a clearance which enables them to be able to view certain types of documents, as well as maintain certain documents that they've declassified under the Presidential Records Act that enables them to either put into an archive or into a future library. Well, we know that Joe Biden actually attempted and actually revoked the classifications for and clearance of President Trump, which is really truly unheard of, but kind of sets the path for where he's being set up as they try to then demand and say that he has documents in his possession, which thereby is, classified beyond his actual clearance capabilities and capacities. So that was the first thing. The next thing is that the president, under the Presidential Records Act, has a right to declassify certain documents. Joe Biden and the prosecutors keep talking about these nuclear codes and national security elements, knowing that the nuclear codes themselves continually change and they don't go from one president to the next president. So again, all these things are not only able to be declassified, but the idea that they're going after the president, knowing that you had Bill Clinton, knowing that you had Hillary Clinton and her emails and her server that she purposely destroyed, knowing that you had Joe Biden, who was, when he was a vice president, was maintaining classified documents in Penn University, in his garage behind his Corvette that were, unsecured. It's just an irony that they would go after the guy who can actually turn the tides when it comes to America in the 24 election. And it seems that what Joe Biden's truly doing is weaponizing his Department of Justice to go after political opposition, which is really something you'd find in places like China, Russia, and Iran.
Yeah, I mean, we should point out that a new I&I tip poll finds former President Trump now with a 36-point lead in the Republican primary race, earning the support of 55%, while DeSantis is at 19%. Former Attorney General Eric Holder claims if Trump is reelected in 2024, Democrats must remove him from office. Watch this.
The notion that you could have a trial, defendant be convicted, somehow win the election, be sworn in as president, or whenever it happens, that seems inconsistent with our notion of fairness, of the rule of law. At that point, I would hope that an impeachment proceeding might be considered, not only considered, brought, and ultimately he would be removed from office.
Well, this from the man who was actually served with contempt of Congress while in office. And we should also point out, Congressman, that in terms of these classified documents, in no law does it say that a sitting senator can take classified documents out of the SCIF, the secret room there. And yet Joe Biden has all of these classified documents. I don't know if he stuffed them in his pants or how he did it, but he's got these documents from when his time as a senator. And so we don't know where that's going to lead. Obviously, it looks like two tiers of justice. But what about all of the focus around Biden and the influence peddling? Do you expect, since Karine Jean-Pierre claims that the DOJ has integrity, do you expect that we are going to see any attention paid to that?
Well, that's a great leeway. I mean, look, let's think about the timing of all of this. You've got President Trump, who is the front runner and will be the Republican nominee, and as they're already concerned about, will be the next president in 24, where they're trying to utilize the DOJ as an influence operations within the campaigns and within elections. And at the same time, you have where Zlochevsky, who is the owner of Burisma, has now reported as the whistleblower that he has over 17 recordings of both him and Hunter Biden and also of him and Joe Biden, who he has referred to as the big guy. They talk about the $5 million in the pay for play. They talk about the Burisma scandal. We know that you have federal document 1023 that has just been released, not only to the Senate, but also to the House Oversight Committee. You know, this seems to me, Maria, like they're trying to ensure that they have an indictment on President Trump because they know he gets larger television ratings so that they can try and go ahead and conveniently bury the fact that Hunter, Joe Biden, and the Biden crime family are now having plausible evidence with the series of their LLC web chains on how they are laundering money for a pay-to-play scheme for quid pro Joe.
Well, this is all quite extraordinary, and we are talking about those 17 recordings coming up in the program. Congressman, we'll keep a spotlight on it. Thanks very much for being here this morning.